Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you all to the Southwest Florida Pachamama Alliance Community presentation on the Rights of Nature movement. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Holly Rowan, and I'm streaming to you from Fort Myers, Florida, where the Calusa tribes lived and thrived for over 2,000 years. We honor their spirit and the Miccosukee and Seminole tribes that presently live in our precious Everglades and around Lake Okeechobee. One of our speakers, Gary Robbins, and I are co-founders of the Southwest Florida Pachamama Alliance Community. And along with Joe Benassia, we are founding members of the Southwest Florida Reset Center. Gary, Joe, and I work together on the Reset Center Board of Trustees, building awareness and networks through addressing global warming solutions for our bioregion and the planet. We're so happy that you're all here. Over 140 people signed up on Zoom for this webinar, and we're delighted that there's so much interest in promoting the rights of nature. I just want to introduce you very briefly to Gary and Joe. In addition to being co-founder of the Southwest Florida Pachamama Alliance Community, Gary Robbins also works to promote the Earth Charter and the rights of nature. He is vice president of the Lee County Rights of Nature organization, as well as vice president of the Southwest Florida Reset Center. Gary is a member of Toastmasters and an active leader in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fort Myers. And Joe Benassia, what an amazing man. He is vice chair of the Southwest Florida director for the Florida Rights of Nature Network, as well as our local Lee County Rights of Nature chapter, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Mostly this means that Joe speaks publicly and writes about the rights of nature. Joe also serves as education director for the Citizens Climate Lobby of Fort Myers, and he serves as CCL's legislative liaison to Senator Rick Scott's office. As members of the Pachamama Alliance of Southwest Florida, Joe and Gary both help facilitate Awakening the Dreamer and Drawdown workshops with a focus on college students and faith-based communities. As a member of the local Sierra Club, Joe has been doing grant writing and written communications work, as well as for the Cape Coral Friends of Wildlife and Cape Coral Wildlife Trust. Wow, Joe. And now let us take a deep breath as we begin with acknowledging sacred space and centering with Gary.
Welcome to this great circle of people with warm, open hearts and great dreams of a more beautiful existence for all our relations for generations to come. Let us acknowledge sacred space here in which we gather this day. This is part of the universal, eternal sacred space. We do not create it. It is always here, ready for our recognition and acknowledgement. In honor of Pachamama, the earth, the sky, and all of time. In honor of the lives of all our relations who have come before us, the elemental cells that created life for the very first time in the history of Pachamama. They are our ancestors. Every other living species, past and present, they are our relations. Every other human group that has ever lived and learned the regenerative lessons of Pachamama that have been passed from generation to generation. They are our great teachers. For every group of indigenous First Peoples whose land we occupy today, we honor you and seek amends that we might transform our societies into the regenerative powers of Pachamama. Let us breathe. Breathe in the life-sustaining oxygen of our plant relatives. Let us breathe out our gratitude for all that sustains us. let us breathe in the urge for fulfilling life energy. And let us breathe out peace for all our relations. Let us breathe in dreams of a thriving, interconnected, sustainable earth. And let us breathe out a vow to embody our very finest selves in the work we have chosen. In honor of Pachamama, I welcome you to this sacred circle of commitment to the transformation of the systems of human existence so that we might establish rights of nature for the benefit of all future generations of all our relations. That's truly a tall order, but we who are here today are indeed the ones we have been waiting for and looking for all this time. Welcome to all of you who identify as Pachamama Alliance people, and to those of you for whom this is your very first or early exposure to Pachamama Alliance, a very special welcome. The word Pachamama is from the Quechua language of the Andes and means earth, sky, and all of time. Our roots go back to the rainforest of the headwaters of the Amazon in Ecuador, where the Achuar, a dream society people, called on people of the North to help with a major environmental issue created by corporations working to support a way of life that is killing them and us too, of course. So the very foundation of the Achuar and the early representatives of the North was the very same work that we are here to do today. The organization created in those early days became known as the Pachamama Alliance. Incidentally, those of us in Southwest Florida began Pachamama of Southwest Florida in 2016. But the work of rights of nature here has begun here less than a year and a half ago, when Thomas Lindsay was called to jumpstart rights of nature work here. I was thrilled to learn that it was Thomas that Bill Twist called to come to Ecuador to help establish rights of nature in their Ecuadorian constitution, the first country in the world to pass such provisions in their national constitution. Regarding the training for today, we wish to be very clear that we, Joe and I, are speaking from our experience here in Florida. Even here in Florida, issues from county to county will differ in detail about various items related to writing and passing rights of nature charter amendments. So too will they differ in other states and certainly in other countries. But the key principles and concepts will be relevant no matter your place of residence. And finally, I want to share with you that our basic objective for our presentation today is to help you feel confident that you too can drive a successful rights of nature initiative in your community. We will review some of the very basic concepts of rights of nature work, and we will offer you many resources that you can tap into. And lastly, we offer our consultation contacts and services to help you with the work of the community you will build to move your rights of nature amendments to passage. These are all available and relevant no matter your place of residence around the world. So let's have Joe get us started with some very specific rights of nature details. Joe?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today. About a week or so ago, a friend sent me a link to an article that was published online by Forbes. The title was, How Businesses Can Prepare for Rights of Nature. I immediately thought, I know what this is going to be. They're going to recommend a misinformation campaign, such as, oh, rights of nature is going to kill jobs. Rights of nature is going to lead to endless litigation. You're not going to be able to have affordable housing, because those are some of the arguments that were made down here in Orange County within the past year. But how pleased was I to learn that that was not the bent of the article. Instead, the man started giving a very quick little history of rights of nature. And he spoke about how in 2008, Ecuador became the first country to recognize it in its national constitution. Bolivia, 2 years later, passed the law of the rights of Mother Earth. New Zealand granted a national park legal recognition in its own right. He said there are already 30 communities throughout the United States that have passed rights of nature laws. Now, what we're looking at is 4 states here that have proposed amendments to their state constitutions. They haven't been passed yet, but I want you to know that here in Florida, our ultimate objective is to amend the state constitution with the rights of nature. 2016, Colombia noted that the Rio Retrato has rights. New Zealand, 2017, gave a river more rights. India did the same thing for the Ganges and Yukon rivers. And in 2019, Lake Erie Bill of Rights, it was the first law in this nation to secure legal rights for an ecosystem. The man's point was that rights of nature is happening. It's not going to go away. And the way for businesses to prepare is to start getting their environmental acts together now. This is another one of the great social rights movements. Of course, he did mention what happened here in Florida just a couple of months ago. Orange County passed a Right to Clean Water Charter Amendment, also known as the Wekiva River and the Econlockhatchee River Bill of Rights. I want to share with you the 3 most important clauses of that law. Here's the first one. The Wekiva River and Econlockhatchee River, portions of which are within the boundaries of Orange County, and all other waters within the boundaries of Orange County have a right to exist, flow, to be protected against pollution, and to maintain a healthy ecosystem. 89% of the voters made that a law. And when they did, Orange County became the largest jurisdiction in the United States to pass a rights of nature law, and it has become the epicenter of the movement in the United States. Also important, all citizens of Orange County have a right to clean water by having the waters of Orange County protected against pollution. They are the only Floridians with this right. And in fact, there are very few Americans that have this right. Most of us think that it's guaranteed, it's in the Clean Water Act. It is not. And then, of equal importance, Orange County, municipalities within Orange County, any other public agency within the county, and all citizens of Orange County shall have standing to bring an action in their own name or in the name of the waters to enforce the provisions of this section of the charter. The rights of nature movement began with this issue of standing back in the early 70s when the Sierra Club filed a lawsuit against Disney, who wanted to build a resort in a part of the Sequoia National Forest. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. In a 4-3 decision, they decided that, well, we can't do this because the Sierra Club, you don't have standing here. You are not being sufficiently injured. Of course, the Sierra Club's interest was not in it being injured or its members being injured. It was in nature being injured. But nature has no rights. However, a professor at that time, Christopher Stone, wrote an essay called "Should Trees Have Standing?" It ended up in the hands of Justice William O. Douglas, who, in his dissenting opinion, said, you know what? Trees and other aspects of nature, ecosystems, they should have standing, and people have the right to be their spokespeople. So now, with the passing of Orange County, there has been an explosion of interest in people wanting to pass rights of nature laws in Florida, and I hope we have a lot of people from Florida on this call. We now have activists in 30 different communities looking to promote rights of nature. And we have people throughout the country. I had a call the other day with some folks in Colorado, and they want to pass a rights of nature law for pollinators. By the way, I want you to know you can get the full text of the amendment at this website, right2cleanwater2020.com. But I also want you to know that we have what we're calling an ordinance in a box. It's a file, numerous materials, computer files that we are happy to share with you if you just email me later on. You will get the entire text of the Orange County Amendment. You will get a text of a generic new ordinance for the rest of Florida. I'll explain why later. Important FAQs, campaign commercials, graphics, videos, informational brochures that you can use as templates, links to key educational materials and key websites. We just want to give it to you in one lump so you don't have to reinvent the wheel and you can jumpstart your own initiative. But in speaking to those folks in Colorado, because they wanted to know, how do we do what you did in Orange County? And I said you have to do a few things. Number one, you have to establish a need for a rights of nature law. Demonstrate that the laws that you have there now aren't adequately protecting the pollinators. And you have to explain why the laws there aren't working. Then you have to explain the basic principles and concepts of rights of nature, because some people, a lot of people, are going to have a hard time wrapping their minds around this idea. What? A river having rights? You will have to demonstrate the effectiveness of rights of nature laws. And you are going to have to determine a strategy, because there are 3 different approaches one can take to getting a rights of nature law passed. These are the things that we are going to focus on for the next 40 minutes or so. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Gary, and he's going to start talking about establishing a need.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yes, one of the very first things that you want to do is establish the need for a rights of nature amendment to your constitution or to the charter for your city or county. And one of the greatest things that you have available for you is some of the information from your local, state, and federal agencies that look after the water situation in your locale. For instance, US EPA indicates that over 40% of the waters assessed by the states are too polluted to be able to be used for fishing or swimming. You can imagine what else cannot be happening with that water if it's polluted so much that you can't swim in it or fish in it. The 4 top impairments that you would find in that water are pathogens, metals, nutrients, and sediment. And non-point source located throughout the area with stormwater amount to over 40% of those polluted waters, meaning that how we choose to live in our streets, on our lawns, in our wild and farmed fields creates 2/5 of our water quality problems. As one of our most trusted freshwater limnologists has said so clearly, if you wish to improve the quality of your water, you must start with the soil and the land. And we know about water in Southwest Florida. In 2018, we had horrific blue-green algae blooms and red tides, which made international news. Now, just look at the color of the water and the slimy algae on that boater's boot. It's just incredible what we had to put up with here. The polluted, nutrient-rich water came from Lake Okeechobee. It gets released into the Caloosahatchee River and the St. Lucie River on the East Coast and causes these algal blooms, killing thousands upon thousands of tons of dead marine life, floating in our waters and lining our beaches. In the short term, making people sick with headaches and nausea, killing some pets, and causing incredibly severe damage to our local tourist economy. But the most devastating revelation for many of us is the very real possibility of long-term neurological diseases such as ALS, Alzheimer's, and dementia, as so poignantly told in the documentary film Toxic Puzzle, which follows the worldwide work of Dr. Paul Cox and Dr. James Metcalf of the Brain Chemistry Labs in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This film and the expert panels that accompanied it were brought to us together by our very trusted Calusa Waterkeeper organization in the name of John Cassani and Casey Schulberg. And it's an example of one of the many local organizations you might be able to call upon to help you build your case for the passage of the Rights of Nature Amendment in your county or your municipal area. So you might ask, with all the long history of ongoing water problems and the availability of incredible expert resources, why is it so difficult to get it right? Why isn't it working? Well, I'm going to send it back to Joe, who has some reflections and some answers on that.
Sure, thanks, Gary. So one of the things that our riverkeeper, John Cassani, noted in this op-ed is that the Orange County Charter Amendment is a clear indictment of Florida policymakers that don't have the political will to prevent further decline of state waters. Political maneuverings influenced by special interests that benefit from rapid growth continue to plague Florida with ineffectual policies. I believe most of us really understand how this works. Political campaigns are expensive. Corporate interests fund the campaigns of candidates, and then later on, they end up getting the laws that they want, and then we end up essentially having the industries writing regulations that are meant to regulate them. For all the Floridians on the call today, the perfect example of that is the Clean Waterways Act that was passed last year to much fanfare. John Cassani, among many, many, many other authorities, say that that act is going to do virtually nothing. Our biggest problem down here, as Gary started to allude to, is the egregious use of fertilizer by agriculture, and basically no restraints were put on the agricultural center. They can continue voluntary best management practices. So that's the way it works, but we can go with more than just a gut feeling here. In 2014, researchers at Princeton and Northwestern universities released a well-known study comparing all the laws passed between 1981 and 2002 and voter preferences on each policy decision. The policies overwhelmingly didn't reflect the will of the people, but tilt towards the wishes of corporations and business and professional associations, and especially diverge from the will of non-elite Americans. And that comes from the Delaware Riverkeeper, Maya Van Rossum, in a book called The Green Amendment. And even though she isn't pushing rights of nature specifically, the book is loaded with examples of how this system basically is rigged against us. A quick little story. Back in 2014, the 740 residents of Grant Township in Pennsylvania were informed by an energy company that they were going to take their toxic wastewater from fracking and store it in what are now empty gas wells. Needless to say, they did not want that. It was close to their aquifers. And the company told them in advance, if you take any legal action against us, you are going to be in violation of our constitutional rights. You will be liable for millions of dollars in damage, and you are going to have to pay for our legal fees. Those 740 people, pretty darn gutsy, they went ahead, they passed a rights of nature law. And sure enough, they got slapped with a lawsuit that, on top of saying it was in violation of the constitutional rights of the corporation, that they did not have, their government did not have the authority to pass such a law. And this is where rights of nature laws involved community rights. And we don't have enough time to go into the whole thing, but here in Florida, one of the first things in our Constitution is all political power is inherent in the people. The enunciation herein of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or impair others retained by the people, And we have something that echoes that right in the Ninth Amendment of the US Constitution. We have those rights that are enumerated in the Bill of Rights and such, but the framers knew you can't name every right. And so they protected fundamental unenumerated rights, such as the right to local self-government. That is a foundation of American democracy. We have a right to make laws that provide a higher standard of environmental protection if that's what we deem we need. So you can really, and you should, highly recommend it, that you read the legal basis for rights of nature in this article, in this law journal written by Thomas Lindsay, that was already referred to. Read it once, read it twice, understand it well. It'll get your patriotic blood flowing, because it, again, is at the roots of what democracy is all about. It is also highly recommended. By the way, that's in the ordinance in a box, a link to that. You can contact CEDAR, which is Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. And Thomas Lindsay himself will provide a democratic rights and community rights workshop. That's what he did down here. Actually, that was a weekend. He spent the first full day, 8 hours, talking about how community rights is involved with this. Now he's doing it virtually, of course, but I highly recommend that that is a step that you take so everybody is sufficiently educated in the community rights aspect of this. People have to understand that the system is rigged against nature and us, and that they can unrig it, and by passing rights of nature laws. And here's where we're going to talk about some principal concepts. Gary?
Okay, thank you, Joe. One of the key principal concepts that we have to deal with is that all rights of nature laws are all about changing the relationship between humans and the natural world. Several years ago, my wife, Sema, and I went on a weekend retreat with the nephew of the last full-blooded Cherokee medicine man. And he shared many things about his people's history. But one afternoon, we went to a meadow and sat in the grassy flat of the meadow and had our sandwiches. And when we were done, the young man asked us what was all around, the tall things growing around the meadow. And we all just said, that's a bunch of weeds. And then he promptly asked us to get up and walked us around the perimeter of that meadow. And one by one, he was able to share with us the medicinal and nutritional value of each blossom and leaf and root. And it's when you know something so well, when you have that kind of relationship with those things, that you will take good care of it. And we know that children these days get out into nature way too little. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is help people understand the importance of getting children into nature. And some of our people at Reset have been involved in education for years and years in conservation education, and know the value of field trips for children to be able to experience nature. And of course, nature itself is healing. We know that from the way that people heal in hospitals. So the relationship between nature and humanity is really, really critical. And you can see here that this is not a First Nations child in a First Nations environment. That's something that has happened to a natural environment in a way that we see the natural environment as a source, as a resource for our exploitation, for our use in any way that we desire. It is an it to our current way of thinking. And in the Native American way of thinking, there is no way that something is just an it. It is something you have a relationship. You have a relationship with a river, with a mountain, with a meadow. But having a relationship with nature, as in rights of nature laws, is rather difficult for a lot of people because they are vested in the current system. So they cannot see how that we can have a relationship with nature and be able to move with a new way of relating to nature. And one of the things that we need to do is share with them how that kind of thinking has happened in the past. And one of the issues is the rights of women to vote, for instance. Who would have thought in 1848, the same year that Wisconsin became a state, that women would be able to gain the right to vote? This group of women and a bunch of others joined them. There were about 100 people, men and women, gathered in Seneca Falls to start the work of getting voting privileges for women, but other privileges as well. And of course, there were many people that thought that it would be very, very difficult because it would be so detrimental to have women have that right. Well, it took 72 years for women to be able to gain that right. And we are anticipating that while we have forces that have very difficult time understanding rights of nature, it is easier for them to understand the rights of people to clean water. And so that is one of the ways that we are structuring our work so that we get to rights of nature through our right to clean water. And they will be laws that will be fashioned after what we have seen in Orange County. And we look forward to your working on those same laws, and we will be there to help you in any way possible. The foundations of the laws of this country were written, after all, by property owners, and many of the laws that we have give property owners rights, and people do not want to give those up. But if we want to have a sustainable future for all of our descendants, we need to work on these laws and make sure that we get them passed. And of course, our overall goal is eventually to have, in Florida, have a constitutional amendment that would gain those rights. And now we need to move on to our next concept. And Joe, I hand it back to you.
Thank you. Of course, the whole point of women's rights was to correct the unhealthy relationship between men and women that existed at the time. The relationship that the indigenous cultures had was a healthy relationship. They recognized that everybody is in community. Certainly, ecology bears this up as well. I want to bring everyone's attention to certainly one of the most important environmental documents of the last 100 years, and certainly one of the most important sentences. This is from The Land Ethic by Aldo Leopold. I'm sure some of you many of you on the call must be familiar with it. So he said, all ethics, and we certainly hope there's a close connection between ethics and law, all ethics rest upon a single premise, that the individual is a member of a community of interdependent parts. The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community. It changes the role of Homo sapiens from conqueror of the land community to plain member and citizen of it. In communities, members have rights and have responsibilities to respect the rights of other members of the community. The progress of ethics has been an ever-expanding understanding of who's included in community. In the center of the tree over here, originally it's white men with property, and then it's white men even without property, and then it's Black people, and then it's women. And Aldo Leopold back in 1949 was saying it is time for us to recognize that we are part of nature's community, and we must respect the community and the rights of individual ecosystems and such. This was such a great quotation, I had to share it with you. Humanity's task now, and I believe this is from an Australian philosopher, humanity's task now is to resituate non-humans in the ethical and to resituate humans in the ecological. That is what rights and nature's laws do. They build a framework of rights around which lots of laws are constructed, and we end up with an ecological form of governance, where not everything is about human need and want and driving our economy. Rights and nature laws make us respect nature's laws and limitations, and it compels us to finally live sustainably on the planet. So people are going to have difficulty wrapping their minds around that. You're going to have to articulate the basic principles and concepts very clearly in your own way. So are they effective? Are rights and nature laws effective? You are looking at a map of Pennsylvania. All of the purple dots represent fracking wells. All of the green dots represent compressor stations. Both are hazardous to people and nature. That is evident because all of those yellow dots represent violations to the regulations that are meant to protect people and the environment. The man in the lower right-hand corner is a little bit difficult to see because I took this during the first Rights of Nature conference that was held last year at the University of Florida. That is Doug Shields. He's a former Pittsburgh City Council person. He is pointing to what looks like a hole in the lower left-hand corner of the map. That's Pittsburgh. In 2010, concerned about the threats of fracking, and at the time, there was a church in the middle of the city which was just about to sign a contract to let some fracking enterprise dig right underneath their cemetery. So concerned about the threat of fracking, in 2010, they passed a rights of nature law. It has never been challenged, and there is no fracking to this day within city limits. That's the efficacy of a rights of nature law. There was not a lot of litigation. It's all deterrence here. I want to go back to what I told you earlier about that little town of 740 people in Pennsylvania. Well, just this past year in 2020, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection reversed their position. They rescinded the permit they gave to the energy company to dump the toxic wastewater. They said that it was in violation of the law that the Grant Township people had passed. There's no toxic wastewater within township boundaries to this day. So not everything is a success. I mentioned the Lake Erie Bill of Rights earlier. The Lake Erie Bill of Rights does not exist anymore because it was made unlawful by the Ohio State Legislature at the urging of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. But there certainly are other examples. In Ecuador, case went all the way up to their Supreme Court. Somebody sued a polluter in the name of a river, and the Supreme Court found in favor of the river. There have been 60 cases in Ecuador, if I have that correct, in which rights of nature laws have been involved. Another example to suggest the effectiveness of rights of nature laws. Up in Ohio, it took 8 years for their state legislature to preempt rights of nature laws, to make them unlawful. Here in Florida, it took 8 months. They must recognize how effective rights of nature laws could be if they're going to act that quickly. So what they did, and I'm just going to share this because the Floridians on the call should know, in that Clean Waterways Act that I spoke of earlier, which was 111 pages long, they snuck in this one little paragraph. A local government regulation, ordinance, code, rule, comprehensive plan, charter, or any other provision of law may not recognize or grant any legal rights to a plant, an animal, a body of water, or any other part of the natural environment that is not a person or political subdivision as defined in another section. They made rights in nature laws unlawful throughout the state. But the Orange County law was there first. It is still standing. Sooner or later, there is going to be a court case, and we're going to have to duke out the constitutionality of this law. And that's where the legal basis of rights in nature will come in. However, we want to move forward here in Florida. Outside of Orange County, other jurisdictions, other counties are not going to move forward as long as the preemption applies outside of Orange County. Take a look at the second part of this. Nor are local governments, etc., to grant such personal political subdivision any specific rights relating to the natural environment not otherwise authorized in general law. They're saying nobody has any rights to anything in the natural world. And local governments can't pass laws about that. Well, that's what local governments do. They agree to a zoning change over here. They agree to a new road. This is such a flawed provision that we have rewritten a new amendment, a new ordinance, which circumvents the preemption and gives us, still protects the rights of nature, still gives people the standing to speak on its behalf, but it is not in violation of the preemption itself. It's a language thing. Again, we are willing to share the text of that with you if you just email me later on and I will share that with you. So what are we up to over here? So there are three principal ways, three approaches for you to get a law where you live the way Orange County did. And I'm going to toss this back to Gary.
Okay, and there are three ways, but it's important, first of all, to remember or to know that there is a difference between a charter amendment and an ordinance. You could get your county council or you could get your municipal government to pass an ordinance, a law that says something about rights of nature. The difficulty is that it is potentially very temporary because an ordinance can be changed so very simply. Whereas a charter amendment to your county or your municipality is like having a constitutional amendment. It is the base upon which all ordinances must be built. And so we strongly urge you to consider a charter amendment. It takes a lot more work, but it has a lot more lasting benefit for the community. And the first way in which you might be able to get a charter amendment passed would be to persuade your city council or your county commission to place a rights of nature amendment on the ballot. However, this seems to be the least likely to prove productive. It's very difficult for people to move off of the positions that they have that are in many cases so pro-development that it's very difficult for them to be able to understand how they can at the same time make it possible to pass such an amendment and do it without pressure from the voting public. And so the more likely way that you would be able to get something passed in your local municipality or county would be through a petitioning process. And this is where you propose a particular amendment. You write the amendment, and you do that, of course, with some legal help along the way. And you put in the various elements that we will help you with in looking at what a charter amendment might contain. But even these can be very difficult. In Alachua County, for instance, last year they needed 18,000 signatures, and they worked for 6 months and got about 4,500 signatures to pass an amendment, to get it on the ballot, I should say, to pass an amendment for Alachua County. And one of the difficulties, of course, is that you get only 6 months in most cases to get enough signatures on a petition to be able to get it on the ballot. And when we looked in Lee County, for instance, we originally thought that we were going to do a Lee County Rights of Nature amendment. We discovered that we would need to have 44,000 signatures, all received within 6 months from the moment that the supervisor of elections gives his okay, which means that it comes to about 250 petitions a day that would have to be signed here in Lee County. In both cases, you either need an army of volunteer petition gatherers or you need to pay gatherers and get 2 copies of each petition. And it would cost at least around $200,000 to do that. So in Lee County, we are taking a new tack, and we are working at developing initiatives in multiple municipalities within the Caloosahatchee River watershed. For instance, Fort Myers Beach needs only, because of its population and its voting numbers, would only require 500 signatures. And if we were able to do the same thing in Sanibel takes about 700 signatures. And you have the same amount of time to be able to get those signatures. So you can see that it becomes a much easier task if you go for the smaller communities. And what we're trying to do, of course, is build momentum. And we want to build on what Orange County has done this past year and show that this has tremendous popularity among voters throughout the state, just as it did with the 89% in Orange County. And the third version of how you can get a charter amendment to the public is through a charter review commission, which Joe is going to mention to us.
Right, so this is the way that it was done in Orange County. It was rather fortuitous that when the activists up in Orange County wanted to get something going, it just happened to be the same year that they were having a charter review commission. I think in Orange County, it probably meets every other year or every third year. And so Chuck O'Neill, who this year is a finalist for Central Floridian of the Year for his work because of the Orange County Rights of Nature law, brought it to the attention of the commission. It took 7 months and 11 meetings to hammer out the language that I shared with you earlier on, those 4 rights. There were 7 attorneys involved, and they went back and forth numerous times. The language you saw was not the language that was originally offered by the activists. But at one point, one of the attorneys said, well, do you want a show pony or do you want a workhorse? What we ended up with was a workhorse. It is a law that has been vetted by 7 lawyers, and it's going to do a good job. It will be defensible and all that sort of stuff. A lot of time went into articulating that particular language. And you may not have the good luck to have a charter review commission going when you want to drive your Rights of Nature initiative. But these are the principal ways. And when you get your team together, you will decide which way is the best to go. So I see we're already at 3:53. So I want you to know that once you determine your strategy, it is time to craft the legislation that you want, the Rights of Nature ordinance or amendment. If you are in Florida, you can approach us here, Florida Rights of Nature Network. There is our website. Again, this will be in the boxed ordinance. And also, you can, if you're outside Florida, or even if you're not, you can connect with Cedar and Thomas Lindsay and his colleagues will help you craft a language that will prove to be effective. All right, so we want to wrap it up so we leave enough time for questions and answers. So very quickly, Gary, let's go through some important FAQs, or at least let people know about them.
Okay, yes. If you go to the fron.org website, there is a button for frequently asked questions. Just very quickly, the 4 that we want to focus on: will rights and nature laws hurt Florida's businesses and economy? And obviously, our tourism is based on clean water. And if we don't have clean water, we devastate the economy of Southern Florida. And it is obvious that rights of nature, which would guarantee that we would have clean water, would be very beneficial for our economy. Will rights of nature laws lead to a proliferation of lawsuits? We have not seen that happen either in Orange County, since November, or in Pittsburgh, which passed its Rights of Nature Ordinance in 2010. There's much more discussion on these questions at the FRON website. Can an individual get sued under rights of nature laws? No, specifically, they are prevented from being included in lawsuits. And is the rights of nature movement in Florida effectively made non-existent outside Orange County because of the state preemption? And absolutely not. As Joe said, we've got over 30 communities that are interested. If you are in an area that you have an interest in helping get something going in rights of nature, and you've had Pachamama experience, you may want to start a Pachamama organization. We'd be happy to help you with that if you have that interest. And it's a great opportunity for you to do networking in your community and find out who is there to help you. And you probably already know some of those folks, and just a good opportunity for networking to make sure that things happen. We have many other things that we were going to cover, but I think that it's probably best for us. Joe, why don't you talk about elevator speech, and then we can go on to questions and answers.
Everybody, any activist should have an elevator speech ready to go. If someone asks you, well, give me 3 reasons why I should pass a rights of nature law, you cannot be tongue-tied. You must give them an answer. This was presented to a veteran activist, and he gave 1 reason, and then there was silence. There are plenty of reasons. The system isn't working. People deserve and have an inalienable right to clean water. If corporations have rights, nature must have rights, or it can't be defended adequately. And we need to change what is obviously a toxic relationship with nature. You put that in your own words, everyone figures it out, but have it ready to go.
I guess that's my cue, right?
Yes, it is, Holly.
All right.
Thank you.
Back to me, but really back to all of you. We did get some really good questions in the chat, and I even have a few myself. The first one is you might have already answered it, but you might want to say something more from Cynthia in Southern Oregon. Can Orange County's amendment be overturned by the state and federal laws or policy?
Well, that is what a court of law is going to determine. Very specifically, the constitutional issue here is whether or not the state can institute a ceiling preemption. You have floor preemption, such as every student in Florida must go to school at least till they're 16 years old. That's great. We understand that. There's a compelling need. But if you have a ceiling preemption and you tell people, well, you can't strive for anything higher, a higher standard, then you're left with situations where a town cannot defend itself against an energy company that wants to pump toxic wastewater right near its aquifer. So it's going to have to be determined in court. That's what we're looking for.
Excellent. So Mary Jerkin, since the Everglades are so important to Florida and the Gulf, and I think it begins in Orange County, does the rights of nature cover the Everglades? That's the question. Also, is there anyone working on the rights of nature in Collier County?
Collier County is not a charter county. They do not have basically a county constitution. We are focusing on those counties in the state that do, because they definitely have the authority, the constitutional authority to pass a rights of nature law. However, I will tell you that there is a municipality within Collier County that is looking to pass a rights of nature law. And as far as do rights of nature laws apply to Everglades? No, they don't, because they're not in any county or any part of Florida that has a rights of nature law. I will say this: if Collier County were to pass, or Lee County were to pass, or one of the counties that's in the Everglades were they to pass a rights of nature law, then they would have the standing and the law to file a lawsuit against someone up north who's causing the pollution. That's the idea. If I live in Cape Coral, Florida, where we had the devastating red tides and the blue-green algae, we are mostly not responsible for that. It's up in Orange County and north of Lake Okeechobee, those counties who are responsible. But if we're suffering and the ecosystem is suffering, the law would give us the standing to file a lawsuit against those folks up there.
I'd just like to say that one of the things that we're hoping is that we can establish rights of nature along both the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie, as well as up the Kissimmee River Valley, and find communities along those rivers that we can get to pass an amendment. And then through a group of communities, be able to really put pressure on the state to be able to make a difference for the waters in Lake Okeechobee and, of course, in the areas that are served by the discharges from Lake Okeechobee.
That sort of leads to another question, and that is, how is the recent decision to take the Florida 404 permitting from the EPA and putting the protection of all of Florida's sensitive wetlands into the hands of Governor DeSantis and the failed Florida DEP be stopped? And this question really is about the Everglades a whole lot in Big Cypress, where Burnett Oil is lined up and is has permits already signed actually to drill in the Everglades. So do either of you have any suggestions about how we can stop this?
Yeah, a right to nature law. A right to nature law would provide a check on the state. I mean, they could develop, but if it's going to interfere with the basic rights of the Everglades ecosystems, we have the standing and we have the law upon which to contest that, file a lawsuit if necessary. Part of the efficacy of a rights of nature law is in its ability to deter damage before it happens. It's, you know, there are plenty of police officers who never have to use their gun, but they have it there, and that prevents a crime from being permitted. So we are already looking at including language in our new ordinances that is going to definitely highlight wetlands, or at least include them.
Yeah, I know that there already is a lawsuit that's been filed with the Center for Biological Diversity, Miami Waterkeeper, the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, and a few other of the waterkeeper organizations to try to put this back in the hands of our federal EPA. So this is a rights of nature issue, but there's a lot of people really looking at it right now because it's become dire for the tribes in the Everglades.
So my presumption is that those lawsuits are going to have to work within the existing body of laws. The rights of nature law gives them a larger frame with which to work, a higher standard that they can have a cause of action.
Let's see, I think that we've had a few questions about how many people here are in California, and if you have any words of advice for people that are living in California about the rights of nature.
Just about California, the only issue that I know there is that there has been work in Sonoma County, and they've done a lot of work with rights of nature there. And Jason from our national office has been working with them. So if you are interested in getting further information on that work, Jason Bayless at the national office would be available to help with that.
I also think there are 59 rights of nature organizations on the Pachamama Global Commons.
Right.
Check there.
So I think the Pachamama Global Commons is a really good place where everybody can connect. There's a rights of nature group in the Commons, and perhaps not everybody here is a Pachamama person or familiar with that, but we can email you that information.
By going to pachamama.org, you can click the right places and get to the Global Commons fairly easily.
Good. Are you familiar with other efforts around Florida? I read somewhere that Native youth had initiated something, or perhaps the Florida Rights of Nature Network has that information. Do either of you know about Native youth that is initiating something?
I do not.
Not to my knowledge. Thomas Lindsay's been working with a number of tribes around the world, literally, but none that I know of in Florida.
So I do know there are a few members of the Miccosukee tribe. Houston Cypress is one of them that is looking at how to bring to get buy-in more from the tribes on working with the Rights of Nature's network around the state. But that's something that they're having their own litigation, I think, coming up over this permitting issue of sensitive wetlands. So that's all I know right now myself. So I just thought I'd answer it a little bit as well.
I see a number of people are asking, how do we get going? Well, I hope we have provided some information about that today. But once again, if you want a file with numerous beneficial materials, just email me at jbonasa@hotmail.com, and I will send you the boxed ordinance, lots of educational materials. I mean, how do you get going? First, educate yourself sufficiently in rights of nature, and then it's boots on the ground, really.
And then know that you can't do it by yourself. You're not expected to do it by yourself. It's a community project, and that's one of the wonderful things about it. All the incredible people that you meet along the way in making this happen. And once you commit to actually making it happen, the universe really does work in your benefit and bring people to you. You become aware of who might be helpful to you. And networking is just an incredible way to get the kinds of help that you need. And it's a marvelous, marvelous trip. And just look what we're doing for the future. I mean, it's the only way that we can assure that we will have a future.
Sustainable planet.
Actually.
So I think that, Gary, you have just a few closing words for us.
I do. And part of it is just an awesome thank you to everyone who's come today. We hope that we've been informational for you and given you some enthusiasm about the possibilities of making this happen in your community. I want to go back and thank the Achuar people. They really brought us together. And the founders of Pachamama, Jason and Shiwu at the San Francisco office, Thomas Lindsay and Chuck O'Neill, and Carl Digert, who got us going here in Lee County, and the Reset elders who have been so supportive, and our Pachamama friends up in Tampa Bay, who were so instrumental in our getting Pachamama founded here in Southwest Florida. It's an incredible venture, and I bless you for all of your energy and your interest, and be in touch with us so that we can be helpful for you and we can create this community of support for each other. Thank you, and best wishes in making it happen right where you are and bringing that community together to make it actually happen. There's the Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe has 4 bodhisattva vows, and the last one is the awakened way. And I like to say, your awakened way, whatever that happens to be, is unsurpassable. And you vow to embody it. So I wish you to embody your best self in making this happen and bring people in to help you. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you all. Matakawe Oeasin, which means for all our relations.
Indeed.